Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me. It's a pity I had to cancel my trip a few weeks ago because being there in person is, of course, a lot better experience, both for you and myself, to get some interaction. But let's make the best out of it. And if there are any questions, feel free to ask them to the moderators and they'll forward them to me. So indeed, the topic of today, crafting my own software as a service. Who am I? Very important to know, of course, if you want to know what we're talking about. My name is Bart Lannoeye. You can find me on the socials with my name. Used to be Twitter, but these days we use other platforms as well, of course. I've been in technology for about 20 years, or almost 20 years, part of it as a consultant, so advising companies how to build software. Also part of it building software myself, either for myself or in a company building products, mostly as a software as a service. Since half a year, I'm also head of engineering at Fleetmaster, where I coach a team of about 25 engineers in building yet another software as a service, in this case for Fleetmaster. That's management, an ERP sort of for rental and fleet companies. So that's to give you a bit of a picture of where I got all the experience, the ideas, but also seeing the failures, how to do things. And initially I thought to call this talk how to fail your software as a software as a service company, but of course we like to look positive at things, and building things and learning from lessons is always a good thing. Software as a service companies rarely fail because of code. So today I won't show you any code, or at least not significant pieces of code, because that's often the last part these companies fail on. If you look at products, quite often even products can be a big mess of code, but if there's a market for it, then people will buy it. And if you look back, for instance, 10 years, at the early phone apps, the mobile apps, people were not paying 5 or 10 euros for fancy apps if they didn't need them, but they were easily paying those 5 euros or $5 for a fart app. And is a fart app the best piece of code? Probably not, but at least it's sold. So we'll focus on more of other aspects, and then also architecture rather than actual pieces of code. First of all, SaaS, or software as a service. What is that exactly? That's a method of software delivery and licensing, and typically it's accessed online via a subscription model. So in the past, 10, 15, 20 years ago, everyone bought software and then they received either a floppy disk, a CD, a DVD, with their software on that and a certain key. These days with software as a service, that's different. We build a product online and it's typically subscription based. If you look at what Wikipedia says about SaaS, they say it's usually accessed via a web application, so no longer installed on your own computer. There's only one single version of that software, and that's very important if we go forward, because this is already a point where a lot of companies fail. They try to build specific software for their customers, and every single customer is different, so they end up with 10, 20, or even more different versions of their software. And as you probably know, trying to maintain those, deploying those, supporting those is a big task. Typically, software as a service is hosted on IaaS or PaaS components, and that is to allow rapid increase in usage and allow those SaaS customers to have an abstraction of those limited computing resources. You want to scale up, and you want to scale up fast, and you want to make sure that your users don't see that. So, of course, scaling up brings a cost, but being able to deliver your software to multiple customers drives down that cost as well. And that's the economy of scale that then tries or should kick in to keep your business running. Software as a service architectures are typically multi-tenant. and usually they share resources for multiple clients for efficiency. But sometimes they also offer a siloed environment for that additional fee. And that sometimes should be very, very rare because we're again going back to multiple versions, in this case, multiple deployments of your software, and that brings extra work. Of course, every or almost every single company looks at this, certainly because they say, well, we have a big customer, and that big customer needs to have their own deployment because they demand so. And if they demand so, then they will pay for it. And that means if they will pay for it, that we'll manage it. But again, that brings a lot of extra cost, a lot of extra effort you can't put in scaling your software. So, if you look at revenue models, multiple options, some of them are free, but mostly there will be some kind of subscription or usage-based license because in the end you have to make money. Some examples of the software as a service, many of them you know already. For instance, Salesforce, that's business to business. If we look at Netflix, that's one of the biggest one, business to consumer. Everyone knows Netflix. And Zoom, I'm using right now to be able to present you this talk. But also, if we look at AWS and Azure, those are also software as a service. They give us not a single piece of software, but they give us a lot of options, but every single one of them is a service that either Amazon or, in this case, Microsoft provides us as a service. Target audience, that's very important to know, of course. If you build something, who are you going to target? And there's one big pillar, B2B, and as you can see on the right hand, there will be a second one. In business to business, B2B, we will try to help companies to improve their workflows, productivity, and efficiency. So typically, if you build something B2B SaaS, then multiple persons, entire teams, or the whole company will use it. If you look at Microsoft 365, then it's the whole company using that. If you use that Salesforce, it could be only part of the company, but it will be a significant team that's using that. And because of the footprint of those deployments and the pricing that often comes with it, the company building those that software as a service can put a whole sales team behind it and then go to customers, B2B customers, and say, look, we have enterprise pricing. So if you look for most of these solutions online, you will often see one license costs this amount of money, 5 licenses. It will be volume-wise a bit cheaper. And if you go bigger, they will almost always say, contact us, first of all, because that gives them the flexibility to price according to the size of the customer, but also it doesn't show their pricing to competitors. Since these products are often more complex, they will also give dedicated onboarding sessions, training sessions, a lot of material there to help out, maybe even come on site to help you, because often deals for these kind of products, for instance, if you install a Salesforce in your organization, if your organization is big enough, that might be several millions of euros or dollars. And then, of course, putting that onboarding, training, sales team behind it is something they can do, but it also means that you will have a buy-in. When renewal comes within 3, 4, 5 years, you will hopefully have a good experience with that because you had all that training and you will stay with the same company. So in B2B, relationship building to gain loyalty is very important. If you look at the other side, then it's B2C, business to consumer, and there you target individual users. If you look at Netflix, for instance, personally, I have Netflix, but there never came a sales team over to my house. And I don't think any one of you using Netflix or one of the competitors had a sales team coming over trying to convince you to pay that 5, 7, 12, or how many euros it is in your country. Sales cycles are often quite short, be able to enter a credit card, and that's about it. Pricing is very straightforward. It's the same for everyone in a certain region. If you look at, for instance, Netflix, they will have different pricing for, let's say, Western Europe, maybe Eastern Europe, and then Southern of America. That's different because, of course, people earn a different wage. They have a different cost of living, and that's a good way of them to trying to break in that market as well. If you try to get these users, then you will need a good SEO, social media, digital marketing in general, and you aim for a high volume. So B2B, it could be that you have enough with 10, 15 customers, big ones. B2C, you typically aim at a few 100,000, even multiple millions. They are easy to gain, but also easy to lose, and that's called churn. Show of hands, very hard, of course. So I'll go over it just to give you my view of where I have been. And I'll skip to the third point directly. Like I said, in the past, I've helped or coached or even built myself several SaaS solutions, both B2B and B2C. Some of them were a huge success, and that's, of course, good news. Others were less of a success, and some of those learnings I've put in this talk as well. And I even failed some myself as well. Half of my career I have been a software architect, and as a software architect or a manager of a company, it's your task to also fail projects if they are not bringing in enough money. And then, of course, if I say I have failed projects, then you can come with the questions, why would you even bother building a SaaS solution? If we look at one of the big Greeks, Aristotle, he said once, more than 2000 years ago, there is only one way to avoid criticism, and that's to do nothing, say nothing, and be nothing. So if we don't build a SaaS solution, then nobody will critique it, and we will certainly not fail it. Well, the raison d'être, or the reason of being. So every SaaS company that exists because they have identified and tried to sell a solution for a certain problem. And if you don't have a problem to solve, then of course it will be very hard to exist. Of course, almost every single company also wants to make some money, and we don't have to neglect that. If you look at the money part, there's a very known saying in building SaaS solutions, and that's the hockey stick effect. And initially you have an idea and you start to try building something, but you won't get any revenue. And that's why that line is flat. And it takes, like I said, a lot of faith of the parties, a lot of effort, hard work to build something and to make sure that you get a product. And then hopefully you have that inflection point, it starts to shoot up and a lot of people on board onto your product and you start to earn money. And the shape or the steepness of the curve decides, of course, how good your product, good, not good, how much money you can earn with the product, but also how much investors will be interested. So one of the ways to build SaaS companies is, of course, fund everything yourself. Often people will look at funding because that leverage them to go a bit faster. But if you look at, for instance, VCs, they will look at the steepness of the curve because within about 5 years, they want to step out again and they want to make a multiple of their money. So that has to shoot up. If it will go up very slowly, then typically VCs won't be interested to invest. Other companies, maybe not either. How does that translate into money, that curve, and that hockey stick? Well, first of all, you have to dig a hole, and that hole can be a small hole if you build a small product. If you build a big product, it will often be a big hole. And in the past, I've seen companies spent multiple millions to come to the conclusion that what they were trying to build was not even succeeding. And the deeper you dig or the faster you dig, hopefully allows for faster customer onboarding because you have a bigger team building a product, but you're also spending more money on advertising and maybe a sales team, and that's a customer acquisition cost in this picture. So the faster we try to build and the more money we spend on advertising, hopefully the faster the curve will go up, like the orange one. Like I said, hopefully, because it's never a guarantee. It's not because you think you're building something right that you're actually building what the market needs and that it will go up. Time will tell, and if you don't see this point going up by the time you hope it goes up, then you will have to make the decision: do we continue or do we pull the plug? And pulling the plug in time is often better than spending a few more millions and throwing it in that pit. Of course, very important to know, what are we going to build? First, you need an idea. And if you have an idea, you can say, how viable is it? Have I done this before? Or has somebody done this before? Is it brand new? If it's brand new, then why has nobody created this product before? And that's a very important question to ask. And now with AI coming up, a lot of things have not done before, so that could be viable. If you look at proven business processes from 20 years ago and nobody built something for it, then maybe there is no ask for it. So with whatever idea you come up, always ask, would you use it? Would your friends use it? Would your colleagues use it? And would you use it if you have to pay for it? Because in the end, we want to make some money. So if I have to pay €5 or €20, depending on the product, would I still use that product? Better, of course, is to have a solution to a specific problem. Can be your problem, can be someone else's problem. And that will increase the chance of adoption because you have an actual problem to solve. If it's new, in the case of AI, it might be very new and nothing exists yet, nobody built it. If it's not new, then most likely a solution already exists. So you will have to look at your competitors, and sometimes you will have to look very hard to find them, but they will be there. And they have been around for much longer, which means that they have a significant market share with possibly loyal customers. If we look, for instance, at email clients, well, we have, for instance, Gmail, we have Outlook. Well, if you want to break into that market, it's going to be very, very hard. They have a working product, they have a good customer base, and trying to convince someone to move over, certainly in the case where it's for free, then it's going to be very hard. The example I will use a bit further in my talk is a financial tracker, because that's something a lot of people use to get some coding experience, because it has a lot of different angles to look at. That's also something I was looking at a while ago, because as everyone, I hope to save some money for my old days. I try to invest some in left and right, maybe some Bitcoin, maybe some shares, maybe just a saving account, and I wanted to track that. So I was looking around, what are the competitors that are doing the things that I want to do. Initially, I found 3-4 options. I looked at every single one of them, even some trial accounts, maybe by paying for a month, and not a single one of them fit all my needs. So that's why I said, let's build something myself. But over time, since you're building software takes time, you continue to look around, and time will show you have more and more competitors, much more than you think. So while doing research, I found, here you can see another 10, there are probably even 20 more, but I started listing them. And at the bottom, you can see, I also started listing bullet points. What are the shortcomings of each of those platforms that I hope to try fix? So is there still a reason for me to buy the solution for myself or for others as well? So with every single project, even a hobby project, you have to go back and think about, do you want to start building? Do you want to dig that hole and hopefully come out of it? And you could say, yes, Bart, but doing it in your own spare time does not cost you any money. No, it might not cost me real money, but it is an opportunity cost, both in maybe earning some more money somewhere else or spending time with the family. So even if it does not cost me hard dollars or hard euros, it costs me time and indirectly money as well. We have seen a hockey stick, and I found a tweet a few months ago. It says, if you find yourself arguing that your company will win just because your product is better, you should look at the graph, or must put it on your shirt. The colors of the tweet were not very perfect, but for those who are or who can't see the difference, Microsoft Teams is the one shooting up, Slack is the one staying rather flat. And we can, of course, discuss which one is better than the other, and that's a whole different discussion. But as Microsoft had a good way of delivering that software, and it was good enough to get a customer base, they showed up, and in this case, they are a success. So with any possible product, it's not because you think you will build something that's technology-wise better, or might even be a better market fit. If you can't put it in the market, then you won't win. And that's something you have to keep in mind. So I made a decision to go ahead and build that particular product. Of course, with all the other products and companies that I advised, they did the same. So it's time to build. And there again, we have to think, are we targeting B2B or B2C? B2B, very important, you will have to build integrations, but beware to not get caught in customizations, because if you customize for every single client because they ask so, you will spend a lot of money. Money and time not spending on building your actual product. B2C, often standalone, so focus on a good UX to reduce questions, to reduce support, keep your customer acquisition cost low. The good point there is that since you have hopefully millions of customers, you won't have that customization pitfall, because you simply can't do it. If you only have 2-3 big ones in B2B, that pitfall is a lot bigger. How are we going to build the solution? Technology, since we are at a technical conference, that's maybe the most important question that you might be asking yourself. Put some nice terms on here. You could say buzzword bingo. So let's pick something. It's time to make actual decisions so we can build it. Those who know me, and probably only a rare few, but those that know me know that of those 20 years, almost every single day I spent in either architecture or backend, cloud as well. My days in front end were very limited. So if I wanted to build something myself on my own initially, because I did not want to invest a big amount of money to hire a front end developer, I needed to decide on front end technology, and then you start listing up and comparing them. And basically, it does not matter that much. If you see this tweet, is Next.js free? Yes, it is free. But if you don't know the technology, you're going to spend a lot of time and a lot of money and developer time to build something. And that's, in this case, for this particular project, a hobby project, we could call, an issue or a problem I had myself, since I don't or didn't build a lot of front ends. The last time I actually did that was like 17 years ago with some HTML and jQuery. So that's been that long ago. I thought, let's go for Next.js. And so you should use the tech stack you know. So I thought, let's go for Next.js, and I'll show you how I did in a slide. Architecture-wise as well, You could say, let's build a monolith, let's go with microservice, even micro frontends, because of course Netflix does so, or let's go for clean architecture, hexagonal architecture, whatever. Again, it does not matter in the beginning. Building the right thing, building something that fits the market and that you can get your first customers on is more important than building it right. And of course, since it's a hobby project, you want to learn some new things and you want to do it right. But that means that you're spending weeks and months on doing it right rather than putting it in the market. The last paragraph says it, ship it early to validate your IDs and avoid gold plating. And gold plating is something we know often at the end of the project, but putting a lot of architecture in the first days of a SaaS company is also gold plating. A lot of those decisions will depend on the size of the company, the stage it is or it will be in, and your actual goals. If you look at most startup companies, they hope to cash out at some point, and only a few say we will stay in and we will continue until the very end because we truly believe in it, and staying in it for another 20 years will bring us more money and there's nothing else we want to do because this is the dream we believe in, and that's totally valid, but most will of course step out. If you step out, or how it typically goes, if you try to sell, you can typically get 5 to 10 times your annual recurring revenue, depending, of course, in the market you're in or so. But if you look at the growth stage, if you have 1 million recurring revenue, then you can expect, let's say, 5 million when you sell it. If you have VCs in the company, you will have nothing left. If you fund it yourself, that 5 million is yours. But if that means that you spend 2, 3, 4, 5 million on building it right, architecture and code-wise, rather than building the product, that's a lot of money you spend and you won't see back, and you need to get to a bigger scale to be able to get that money back. So in the beginning, do it dirty, know which technical depth you will take, and those are decisions that you will have to take, and look what return you want to get. We've touched B2B integrations, and I wanted to mention them specifically because a lot of us are actually building software B2B. Only a few of us are building it B2C, and that's a tough market to break in. B2B is an easier market, and we often work for a company, and those companies, of course, look for easier money. If you want to, or if you have to integrate with proven third-party solutions. That means, in the case of Fleet Master, we're doing fleet management, and part of that is invoices, creating invoices, sending documents. So we integrate in Belgium with Exact Online, which is an accounting software. We integrate with several document systems like Unified Post, and those are things that you bring as added value. You will not integrate with bespoke customer software. So if one of our customers, one of the car brands or one of the rental companies says, look, we have this custom piece of software and you will have to write the integration, then that's not something you should do as a SaaS company. You're again spending time in building something very specific for that customer, time you're not spending in other customers. If they change their system, then you have a problem. It should be the other way around. You deliver them a service and they should integrate with middleware. They also call it iPaaS. So the ones on the right side, those, the green arrows, you can integrate with because those are common third-party solutions that are used by everyone, that are known. If you want to take payments with Stripe, that's of course something you want to have available, but you will not integrate with custom finance systems, even if it's called SAP, because that's often custom as well. Let's go back to my little case study, the financials tracker. Why did I want to build that? Like I said, I want to have an overview of my financial situation, and I want the numbers to be correct and accurate. I don't want to do manual work. I want it to be secure because some of the solutions I've seen online were far from secure. Also want it user friendly. Business goals, you can't run a company, even if it's a fictitious one or a hobby project, without some goals. I want to learn and validate some new concepts. Since I'm advising a lot of companies how to do things, I also have to stay up to date and learn the things myself. I want to ensure that I follow all the industry standards. I want to make sure that, of course, it's useful for myself and hopefully useful for other people as well. If it's useful for other people, I could make some cash. If I put several hours, days, months of work in it, then maybe you want to get something out of it. And of course, then I have a case study for the presentation. Like I said, I did build quite some systems already, but some of them or most of them are under NDA or have some details I can't share. So I had to give you something to be able to explain some technical decisions. Technology, .NET, React, and Azure. Vertical slice in combination with CQRS and event sourcing. Why did I do this approach? Because I want to focus on features rather than layers. I want to have that flexibility. If I need to do some CRUD, then I can do it CRUD-wise. If there is event-driven, like typical in a financial system, then I can implement it in a different way. And these are pictures from Jimmy Bogart. He has having a talk on Friday morning, I think. Always interesting talks of him. That's what I went with. But as people probably know, you should not stick to one single way of doing things. It's just a way to help out. I used React with Henosia. I'll let it play for a bit. But what is Henosia? It's a tool, and they have presented at Build Stuff 2 years ago as well. That's where I found it out myself, where they have both a designer and production worthy code. And for something like me, who does not write front end code a lot, that was very useful to get started. But of course, you still need to write some code to call your APIs, but it was already a good start. It works both ways. It works with Git as well. So if you want some tools to quickly get started, certainly have a look at Henosia. It's one of the options that I really liked. Maybe most important for the technical people in the room, what actual components did I use? And since I'm a Microsoft MVP in Azure, of course, I used Azure Expo components and not AWS. Would have been a bit harder for me. First of all, app services for my API. It's simple, it's straightforward. I built everything initially as a monolith, modularized monolith, because if you go full microservices from day one, then you're just making it hard for yourself. Why would you? Container apps and functions for the integrations. I want to have some integrations on the right-hand side of the previous picture to be able to scale as well. You don't want to run jobs on the same compute as your API. The front end itself will be hosted on static web apps because that's just simple, straightforward. If you look at data storage, it's a combination of 3 technologies. And why? That's a question you might ask. First of all, Azure Cosmos DB, and I'll go deeper into that one. Then Azure SQL for everything that is relational, because in the end, SQL Server is still one of the best solutions if you look at relational data. And then Azure Blob Storage for the actual files and uploads, whatever they did. My customers use, I put in blob storage and not in a database. Of course, you want everything to be secure, so Azure Key Vault and Azure AD B2C for identity. Never, ever, ever, please never roll your identity system your own. Use something. If you look at B2C, then Azure AD B2C is still one of the cheapest and best supported options, certainly if you build in .NET or on Azure. There are plenty of other options. you can look into as well, but please don't roll it your own. In my case, I used Azure DevOps pipelines. At some point, I was looking at GitHub Actions as well, but I went with what I knew. Azure Cosmos DB, why? It allows for a flexibility of transaction models. For those who don't know Azure Cosmos DB, it's a NoSQL DB. So I can put any scheme into it and it will work. It's high performance if you do it right. Of course, with everything, if you don't write your code correctly, or if your SQL server is not set up correctly, you don't have the right indexes, you don't have the right keys, or even the data in the wrong places, then it won't be performant. Same with Cosmos DB. If you do it right, it's one of the fastest data services available. It allows for global multi-master writing. So in case for a SaaS product, certainly B2C, you want to go global, well, having a data store that is global. So you don't have a SQL server in Europe and a customer in Brazil trying to go accessing that data. No, at Cosmos DB, it's global. That's a benefit as well. And it has geo-replication. How does the data look like? Like if you put it in there, well, there are multiple ways, but in this case, it's stored as JSON. And as you can see, it has some sort of an ID, then a tenant ID. SaaS software, like we said before, is multi-tenant, so tenant ID will be very important. Some other IDs and data that we want to track. And at the bottom, you see some fields starting with an underscore. Those are internal fields of Cosmos DB itself. So those are fields you should not change, but at least you know how it looks like. This is one of the different types of transactions, an actual payment. Of course, if you look, for instance, at a stock transaction, then you will have to include the ticker and the amount of those stocks you bought. If you look at a currency conversions, you will have two currencies. So those are all different models, but I can store every single transaction in the same collection. If you look at solving multi-tenancy with Cosmos DB, you can create a database or a database account per tenant, a container per tenant, or partition key per tenant. The last one is the lowest cost, better to scale, but you have to be aware of noisy neighbors. If one user is using your system a lot, then the others might be impacted if you don't do it correctly. How does partitioning work in Cosmos DB? You have a partition key. And initially, I started with a tenant ID, and every single record or every single database piece of document with that tenant ID will be hashed and will be put in the same container. How do you pick the partition key? That's trying to do it right on Cosmos DB, and that's maybe the hardest part. And you will most likely do multiple iterations, change it again, and it will also depend on your system. So if you have a write-heavy system, then the partition key is something with a high cardinality. That means a lot of options of values for writing to use those arrays, and that's the scaling size or the throughput that's used in Cosmos DB efficiently. If you look at read-heavy, then you want a partition key by which you query a lot, because you don't want to do cross-partition queries. If you can have a partition key, that's the correct one, and for instance, a tenant ID, and then a primary key of your document, so the actual ID, then that document read will be 1, 2, 3 arrays. If your partition key is off, then you might spend multiple thousand arrays scanning all the partitions to find the document. So that's a very different approach. If you look at querying, you can say, well, I will store data based on months, because in a year there are 12 months, and then every query, you can easily say, this data is of the last month. You will have the right partition and you can point to it. If you look at the right side, if you write per day or per month, you will always write on the same partition. So yeah, you don't have that high cardinality, and that is not an efficient use of your resource units. So it's very hard to find or initially, so before you have the experiences, it's hard to find those right partition keys. If you look at a multi-tenant system, that's something that's rather new. They now allow for a hierarchical partition key. So we can have tenant ID as the root, and then, for instance, look at user ID and session ID as extra partition keys combined. So we have more options to write and read to have an efficient use of those partitions. Initially not important, but if you try to build a scalable system and you will have a lot of volume, you will quickly find out what the cost of those use is if you don't have the right keys. Of course, as with all data, use a surrogate key, a fictitious ID, incremental ID, a GUID, whatever. Don't use, for instance, a person's name as a key, because that could change and then you'll have problems. The emulator does not use support or does not support hierarchical keys. That's interesting to know, but on the other side, I often say if you build for the cloud, then you should test on the cloud as well. Out of scope, but I wanted to touch it because it's important for building SaaS. Look at multi-region deployments. Look at the Azure Architecture Center. So we have the resiliency. Of course, if you want to do that, don't roll your own identity system. If you go B2B, look at federated identity, B2C options as well, but don't with yourself. If you would go for SQL Server, there's something called, or just multi-tenancy as in general, there's something called deployment stamps. So typically you will start top left, which means a single web service, and then everything in a single database, but you might move over to the other options. So one database per customer. Of course, if you have millions of customers, that's not maintainable. Then you might look at sharding. So you put multiple customers in the same database and you have a shard map, a tool that says, very similar to the Cosmos DB hashing, this customer is in this specific shard, so the data has to be stored there. If we look at multi-region deployments, for instance, or if you want to have that specific customer on its own compute, they will have more compute blocks, bottom right. There you should look at those deployment stamps. So every single deployment is automated and it's similar to itself. So you don't make manual deployments, you don't make the failures of or have a chance on failure. So if you really want to go that far, certainly look into deployment stamps. But for my small application, that was, of course, way too complex. Within Azure SQL, very similar. You can also have that sharding available. There is even a .NET library that you can find on the Microsoft Docs. And in Entity Framework, you will have a query filter for your tenant ID. Tenant ID should be in every table that is shared. So if you have data, in my case, I use SQL Server for data that's not shared, being, for instance, stock prices or currency conversion rates every single day between euro and US dollar. That's general. You don't have to filter that on tenants. But if I would have stored some data I did in SQL, then I have a tenant ID, so I can make sure that I filter on that tenant ID and I don't leak any data. You can even go a step further and use that for partitioning, table and index partitioning, so it's stored in different places as well. Anti-patterns, very important to know what you should not do. Follow the same anti-patterns of normal software, but we'll add a few more. So noisy neighbor, we've covered. Make sure that one customer that uses your system a lot cannot bring it down your system. And that's where you will have to look at how do I split up my data, or even how does it impact compute? Can I scale out? Cross-tenant data leaking. Make sure that your queries have that tenant ID in there, that you test for it, that you try to retrieve data from another tenant and that it's actually blocked. Statefulness. Make sure that you can scale out whatever or follow according to your needs. that you don't run into keeping those states in your compute. And for relation databases, make sure that you don't build or don't deploy your 50 tables that you have for every single tenant in a different schema or a different name. Be aware with column level customization. So what I've seen in the past as well with some of those companies, they had 200 columns in their, let's say, in this case, vehicles database, but because I'm at Fleetmaster now, because they want those fields for every single customer. And that means that for all the other customers, those fields are empty, but that largely bloats up your table, of course. You can store that differently. You can have, for instance, a JSON field, or you can put it in a NoSQL database to give you some flexibility. Make sure, of course, that you have software automation and you have your version dependency, so you can roll out a single version, or you can do a stage rollout to your customers, and that your database is not a bottleneck to keep you back on that. Quick recap of the financial tracker, some of the decisions I made or the business goals. If we look at this, what I said before, trying to learn new concepts, trying to learn new technologies, following industry standards. Are these the goals of a healthy SaaS company? Of course, I can't ask for a show of hands because I don't see you right now. So I'll just give you the answer. Overthinking is not releasing. We have seen this picture before. Building the right thing is more important than building it right. Trying to do it right and trying to learn new things is not the best way to deliver a SaaS solution. It's a nice way to do a hobby project, and that's why a lot of engineers in the room as well, we like to do those projects. But if you want to make money, look at releasing fast, take that initial technical debt, and then at some point you will have to decide, do I just sell the company? Do I stop the product because it doesn't bring any money? Or do I start fixing that technical debt? And fixing could be refactoring. It could even be rewriting. And that's something you will have to decide on your own, or hopefully together with other people. Looking at my own hobby project, like I said, I did some things wrong. I'm not a front-end expert. I can't build nice front-end, so it's hard to convince people. I want to do everything right because I want to learn, because I want to coach companies to do it right so they don't have to spend that time. So that means that I did not release my product. Does that mean that the product is dead? Well, as long as, like this meme says, as long as I pay that 12 or whatever, I think it's around $12, the actual $12 in domain renewal. That means hopefully someday I will release it. Time will tell. So it's a fun project, and we'll see where it goes. So even though the case study is not live yet, all the decisions made to build that single product, but what I've quickly explained today, but also the warnings I gave today, the lessons learned, and the concepts in building a SaaS product are valid. Like I said, I've built more than a handful, or advised on more than a handful of those. I've seen a few fail because they did build those customizations, because they did not check their competitors, because they did not check the market fit. And those that do succeed are the companies that follow those rules. So I hope that with this talk, I gave you some ideas, but also some warning points to, in case that you're already building or looking into building a SaaS product, that you should do some things and should avoid some things. So with that, I would like to wrap up. If there are any questions, feel free to ask them on Pine. I'll check them later today, maybe even tomorrow as well, if they keep coming, and I'll be happy to help you out and answer them. Otherwise, later on, feel free to reach out on social media as well. And thank you for joining, and hopefully you will have a lot of more interesting sessions in the coming 2 days.